What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, and welcome to episode 71 of Politically Conscious. I got Emil Bryan in this thing with me, as well as Shelly Winters. If you are so happen to be a first-time listener, because we are growing now, we're regularly reaching about 5,000 people every time we do this thing or more. We broke our record a couple of weeks ago at around 7,000 or 8,000 watchers. So I want y'all to keep watching, keep sharing as we bring you, as we say, if you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us, Politically Conscious. We basically look at various clips on political news around the internet and give you a left and right take on it. I have my brother, Emil Bryan, on the left of things. If you will, Emil, introduce yourself very briefly, and we'll get to Shelly and get started with a, actually, instead of a clip, we're going to start with a picture today, if you will. But go ahead, Emil, tell them who you are.
Emil Bryan, I am an author and a political consultant. My job is to advise candidates when they come to me to tell the truth, tell it early, tell it often. Bad news does not get better with time. What that means is simply that an informed voter is a good voter, a great voter. They make better decisions when they have information. So politicians, tell the truth. Don't hold back. We can take it. We're adults.
Now I love it. All right, Shelly, from the Shelly Winter Show, you're getting bigger and bigger across the nation as well. Tell them who you are, and we'll get started with this picture that actually you posted on your page, and I had a comment. We're going to start the show with me, ask you to respond to my comment, but tell them who you are first.
Shelly Winter, host of the Shelly Winter Show on 95.5 WSB, Atlanta's News and Talk. You can catch me every night, 7 to 9 p.m. If you're out of the state, you can listen at WSBradio.com, or you can listen at 95.5 FM.
Nah, good stuff. All right, instead of a clip today, we're going to start with this picture. Again, this was posted on Shelly Winter's Facebook page, and he made some comments. And your comments, Shelly, I'll share those comments with everybody. You said, obviously, we're talking about the Voting Right Act, and I just lost it. Oh man, what happened? I just had it on my page. Sorry, y'all. I was about to read your comments. You just said this. I know something to the effect of, this is the voting map that we are fighting for. You mentioned that. And I actually wanted to read my comments, and somehow I just clicked off of them by accident. Let me see if I can find. Here you go. I found. Okay, yeah. This was your comments. You said, this is the Louisiana map that many of you are fighting for. On the other hand, I hope that Repubs don't go drawing these types of maps for their own power grab. My response to you, and I wanted to get your response to start the show off today, was, Shelly, actually, it is more accurate to say this is the map that many are fighting to take away. And in this case, your hope is foolish. You actually have the best remedy for redistricting to draw the maps in squares. But let's not pretend those fighting to end this map are not aiming to disenfranchise the voters in those districts. Let's at least call a thing versus pretend and hope fairness is the aim and race isn't the premise for this. So, brother, what would be your response to what you had to say about this particular map?
Well, I'm not sure that your comment says anything naturally different than what I said. Of course, race is at the heart of it, because that's the map that was drawn was based on race. So obviously race is at the heart of it. And what I was saying was, this map clearly, that congressional map clearly is a ridiculous map. You know what I mean? It's the ridiculous congressional district. And to your point, let's just draw squares. I'm all for that. I would like to see competitive congressional districts. I want to see Republicans and Democrats fight for an honest race for Congress where people get to choose. The problem here, I wouldn't say the problem, the issue here is any map drawn of mostly African Americans is by definition going to be a Democrat map, because 90+% of African Americans are Democrats. The same doesn't hold true for whites. You can draw an all white map and have it split between Republicans and Democrats. Of course, depending on where you are and stuff like that. But by and large, due to integration, you can draw, not due to integration, but due to where we are in this country right now, you can draw a map around a group of white people, and you could have sometimes just as many Democrats as Republicans. Look at Johns Creek and North Fulton County and North Georgia, not North Georgia, but north of the metro. Look at areas like that, and you can see it for yourself. So that map that Louisiana tried to draw was just patently an absurd map designed to have a majority black district. And it goes through the state. And I mean, to your point, we should just draw squares around about 400,000 groups of 400,000 people and start the square, go down, go across, go down, go across, and just draw the maps that way. I'm all for that. So I don't really know what I would really respond to, because we're essentially saying the same thing, except that you're saying that the other side is trying to do the same thing the Democrats are doing. And that's kind of what I said. I hope the Republicans don't do the same thing. So yeah, I'm not sure what the question is, quite honestly.
I got you. So I just simply challenge the sentiment that you hope the Republicans don't do that. And I just feel that it's not the only thing I challenge, but I'll just say that I feel like, one, that hope is foolish, because I just highlighted that you led with the context when you posted on your page. You said this is the map that Democrats are fighting for, and I said in actuality it's more accurate to say this is the map that those are fighting to take away. That's a more accurate context of what's happening here from my perspective.
But I would agree with taking away that map. I think it's silly to draw a map like that. I just think it's if the Republicans were to draw the same exact map for white people, we would say that's crazy. That's my point.
Though that is why the map looks the way they did, is they drew it for white people. It's not the other way around, Shelley. That map was drawn by white politicians for white politicians.
That
map was drawn by white politicians for white politicians. That is how that map came to be. That map was not drawn by black politicians for black politicians.
How could that be? I'm not sure
what the majority of people that drew that map.
Well, I'm not sure
after the last census in 2020. They drew the map in the Louisiana State House. Who drew that map? There weren't a majority of black legislators that drew that map.
And not only why. Let's do who and why.
Louisiana drew that map to have a majority minority district.
No, not Louisiana. Who in Louisiana drew that map?
I'm not. Are you saying based on race or Republican or Democrat?
No,
I'm not sure.
No. Listen to what I'm saying, Shelley.
I know what you're saying.
Who drew that map? White politicians or black politicians?
Well, I would say the majority in the state legislature in Louisiana, which is going to be white politicians.
So then white politicians drew that map for whom?
For black people to have representation in Congress.
That's not what they did. They drew it so white people could have representation in Congress.
But they already have representation in Congress in Louisiana.
Isn't that a wonderful thing that they were able to figure that out without having to redraw the map mid-census?
Right, but I'm not sure.
They're redrawing the map in order to do what? Because if they had drawn the map to protect white voters, which is what they did, what's going on now?
I'm not sure if I understand the logic here. The logic is that white politicians drew an all-black map in order to protect white politicians. In Louisiana, which is majority white, the only way you're going to get a majority black district is to draw a map such as that. Because
which came from the Voting Rights Act, because there was the only reason the map looks the way it does is because white politicians drew the most accurate map they could within the boundaries of the Voting Rights Act. That map was drawn by white politicians to protect white politicians within the boundaries of the Voting Rights Act. As soon as the Voting Rights Act was stripped, they changed the map in order to protect white voters again. They didn't draw this map to protect black voters. The Voting Rights Act was the constraint they had to follow in order to draw that map. So if they have no constraint called the Voting Rights Act, they're going to redraw the map to protect white voters again.
But so the logic here that I'm hearing is let's draw all black map to protect white voters. That's kind of then that's the impetus of the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act in 2019
was clearly written in 1965 in order
right.
to ensure that a place that had a majority black vote
right.
would be able to elect voters or elect politicians based on that vote. There was a suppression of the black vote that the Voting Rights Act was supposed to undo or at least remedy. So that map reflects that basic remedy. As soon as that remedy goes away, they're immediately trying to redraw that map in order to protect white voters.
Right. So here's the point. In 1965, you have segregation where blacks were forced to live in areas created, designed, however you want to say, for them. Now you have full integration in this country. So you have blacks and whites living side by side in rural areas and urban areas. So now it's virtually impossible without a map like that, which is crazy. To Montoya's point, you should just draw squares, because guaranteed if you draw squares across any state in the South, you're going to find squares that are going to have minority black areas. Here in Georgia, most of our congressional districts, with the exception of one, have a majority of black people living in that area as they're currently constructed. 13 congressional districts in Georgia, or 14 in Georgia, and 13 of the 14 have majority white areas. They may have high percentages of black people, but the majority are white in Georgia. The only one that's not is one congressional district, as currently drawn, that has mostly black people, and that's only about 51%. And so any idea that you're going to use a 1965 law that was designed and written in a time where we could not live next to white people by law, we couldn't work with white people by law, you're going to use in 2026 to draw congressional maps just to ensure black representation is going to look like that. And that's ridiculous, because we're integrated now. So now if I'm an African American Democrat right now, I'm not fighting to go back to 1965. I'm fighting for the maps to be drawn in a way that allows the population, whether it's Republican or Democrat, in this case, mostly black people are going to be Democrat. That's not a fault of the map drawers. That's a fault of ours.
So let me
this
jump
map,
in.
this.
When he finishes, I want to let him finish though. I want to let him finish.
No, I'm saying what's going on right now, going forward, we could fight now, or we could fight looking forward and say, this is why many of us should be looking, as I said all the time on this station or this show and every place else, as 13% of the population, we should be not tied to one political party. Because these new maps that are going to be drawn, if they're going to benefit Republicans, then we could fight that, or we could start to influence the Republican Party by taking our votes either way. That's the only way to fight, and that's the logical way to fight, and it's the way we should have been fighting since the year 2000, 25, 26 years ago. But 90% of us are tied to one party. So it's easy to manipulate any map to make you ineffective. And by the way, how much power did these black representatives have for us? In 2020, when Joe Biden ran for office, one of the biggest issues in the black community, according to Gallup, was reparations. What did we get from the Democrats' representatives in Congress in majority black districts around reparations? Oh, I know, a study, which has been done since the 70s. Go ahead, Montoya.
All right. And so, and since you've known me, Shelly, what you just said is what I've been advocating since you've known me. Will you give me that personally? I'm talking about blacks being independents. Like,
yes.
Have you ever known me? And my reasoning was for exactly what you just said. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying that highlighting that you've known me. I've been saying that since you've known me, and I think we've known each other for about a decade now, maybe longer. All right. And so So I'm a big fan of that. However, my however to you is just the context that you put it in. I think Emil, and we're going to go to a cut to continue this conversation. I'm just highlighting that the one thing I feel like you have incorrect is the context. Emil is basically saying that basically once you had the voting right of 65, the Voting Rights Act of 65, it served as a guardrail, and he's highlighting that the reason that you even got these all black districts, it wasn't us fighting for all black districts or having the power to. He's just saying with the guardrails, the white politicians chose to draw it for themselves as close as possible based on the guardrails. And so the reason we see this act being taken away is because those same politicians now have the opportunity to take away the guardrails. And when you say, I hope the Repubs won't do this, I say that's foolish because that's exactly what they're going to do based on the history. It would be foolish to say it any other way. Where we're in agreement, before you say anything, where we're all in agreement is, and the thing is, you were the one that said draw them in squares. That's not my idea. That's your idea. So I want to respectfully give it to you. You said it on this show, and we all agreed that would be the proper way. So it ain't that we actually agree with you, Shelley, that that's how it should be done. But it's naive to suggest that those who took this to court are doing it with the hope of doing it correctly. I agree that we should be fighting for squares, but the reason that it's happening is for the reasons Emil said. The context is they've only done it that way because of the guardrails. It would be foolish to assume that without the guardrails that it's going to be done the way that we asked. But as a republic, we all should ask for squares. No, but if you miss the context of why this is being done, people are not going to ask for squares.
Well, I guess so.
You know as well as I do, there's a bill pending in Congress to outlaw gerrymandering and to go to either bipartisan or nonpartisan, basically computerized district drawing. And the Republicans have never voted for it and never will vote for it, even though that's what you advocate. And I agree, at some point we would like to get there. The problem I have is that right now you do not have the intent to woo black people into the Republican Party, and therefore we're sitting on this thing with no intent to actually bring an integrated political system into play. Here's what I mean. You talk about we can live together. Since 1968, the Housing Discrimination Act of 1968, black people have maintained roughly 90% of the de facto segregation they experienced before that act. In other words, we have the opportunity to move, but we haven't moved for 1,001 reasons. And I can tell you from my lifetime, I had to endure a Housing Discrimination Act violation. So I know it's possible that we could be integrated, but it's not probable based on the statistics of how people have moved in the last 50 years. Do we hope to get people to move and integrate more? Absolutely. But the facts are we have not integrated the way that the law says we can. And that de facto segregation is being addressed by the Voting Rights Act today. And it's not the ideal situation. It's not the one that we would advocate if we otherwise would have a competitive Republican Party. But today we do not. And it looks like they're not looking to woo the masses of black people. Because if they were trying to woo the masses of black people, to your point, they could have put reparations on the table just as easily as the Democrats, and they would have our vote.
They would never have done that. They would never have done that. But let me say one thing. When I said the Republicans would never, I hope the Republicans don't do the same, I meant draw that kind of map. The Republicans are not going to draw squiggly line maps across the state.
Who was in the Louisiana State House majority?
They drew it.
2020.
They drew it.
They're the ones who drew that map, bro. That's the fact.
Okay, so allow me to say what I said, right? They drew the map to have, like you said, the guardrails. Within the guardrails, the map is drawn. The guardrails are taken away, whether it was a slick trick, whether it was whatever it was, the guardrails are taken away. I'm saying in my post, I hope the Republicans don't draw this map for Republicans. That's what I mean. Like whoever drew it, let's say it was a slick trick to go to the Supreme Court and say, hey, look what we did. It's illegal. Ha, ha, ha. Get rid of the guardrails. Okay, let's say they did that. I'm saying that I hope Republicans don't draw squiggly line, snake-like maps through a state to make it all white. That's all I'm saying. And I don't think they're going to do that. They're going to take away Clyburn's seat. All they're going to do, Clyburn's seat is majority black. All they got to do is divide up that black vote on one congressional district into another.
If it wasn't working to their benefit, why did they challenge it? Sorry, let me rephrase. They challenged it because it was working against their desired interest. So they challenged the law. Had the law been working to their favor, they would not have challenged it. They would not have celebrated that it was struck down. They would not have wanted to redraw those maps. So clearly they have an incentive to challenge the law. It isn't for fairness, although that's the bit of theater they put in front of the people. But in fact, if it was truly because they wanted fairness in elections, they could just as easily have outlawed gerrymandering with the Democrats. They could have just as easily drawn these maps in different ways than they did, and they could have just as easily not treated black voters the way they have in the old Confederacy, where all of this is taking place. They didn't do that. The history is very clear. It doesn't take a scholar to see it. And we're talking about something they did themselves because they would have done worse without the law.
Let me go to this clip.
For all those who agreed with Mr. Huggathug the other day, tell me if you agree with Governor Jeff Landry today as he discusses the Supreme Court ruling that strikes down Louisiana's second majority black congressional district. Watch this.
Congressman Troy Carter just put out a statement that this dilutes the power of black voters here in Louisiana. How do you respond to that, Governor?
I disagree with that. I mean, look, I think this whole race baiting race issue on the redistricting has been put to bed finally once and for all. What it says is that listen, the legislature and the people control the pen, not the federal government, not a federal judge. This is the legislature. Remember, that legislature represents the people.
Now, Jeff says that it's race baiting for black people who make up 33% of the state of Louisiana to want to have equal representation in Congress. No, we don't want taxation without representation. Secondly, the governor says that the will of the legislature is a reflective of the will of the people. Well, the legislature drew state maps that robs Louisiana black voters of 8 to 10 seats in the legislature, which allows them to pass all of these racist maps. And if you don't think that this will impact you, Marsha Blackburn, the senator from Tennessee, is already encouraging the legislature in Tennessee to redraw their congressional maps to eliminate all black and Democratic congressional seats. She's running for governor of Tennessee. Now I want you to listen to State Representative Edmund Jordan, the chair of the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus, as he explains the racist history of Louisiana stripping away black political power.
This reminds me of 1868 when John Willis Menard was elected by the people of Louisiana and was not seated by Congress. And then in 1873 and 1874, the people of Louisiana, mostly African American as well, voted for PBS Pinchback, our former governor, to serve in the U.S. Senate, and he was not seated as well, both of them because of race. And I'm sure people had their valid reasons for which they said. This brings me back to 1898, the 1898 Constitution here in Louisiana, where we went and dealt with, created this non-unanimous jury to uphold the supremacy of the white race. And so we've got all these things in this backdrop and all this context that we're dealing with. And I just wonder, how do you want history to remember you? Because we are going back in those same lines.
Now I live in Baton Rouge, and this is my Congressman Cleo Fields, and that is Troy Carter, the congressman from New Orleans. Listen to Congressman Cleo Fields, who this exact same thing happened to in 1995.
And the courts ruled that they were right. The legislature went back and eliminated the district. Here we go again. I've never served a day in Congress without a lawsuit in the Supreme Court. Louisiana's minority population is over 33% black. people have a right to participate in their democracy. If you tell me,
Emil, I'll let you jump in on that one first as I let Shelly start the last one. Any thoughts? I think it just continues what you and I have been talking about I think it's disingenuous not to see the intent for what it is. That's just my perspective.
That's my whole premise. I want a fair election. I want Black people to have representation based entirely on their political views. Unfortunately, the history of this nation doesn't let that happen. So what are we going to do about it? Well, until we see that happen, we're going to have to use the Voting Rights Act as it was. I wish we still had it the way it was, but the Supreme Court undid so much of it. And that's where we stand. If we had a fair political system, which we've never had, and to Leo's point, when he's on the show, he always emphasizes politics is a competition for resources. In all of the cases that the Voting Rights Act was used to make those maps the way they are today, the competition for resources indicated that was the most favorable map to protect the rights of Black voters. Where I disagree with Shelley is that we're integrated. We're not. The statistics do not bear that out. Geographically, politically, they do not bear that out. The law says we're integrated, but practice says we are not. And I agree with him that Black people should not be wedded to one party. I agree with you, Montoya, we should be independent. But we also need a party that woos our vote with issues that affect us the way we want to see them legislated. We don't see that, and therefore they're willing to gerrymander us into oblivion until we capitulate to their agenda versus the other way around. And until that happens, that map would have looked, had the Voting Rights Act been sustained, that map would look the way it does. I don't like it, but the facts are, historically, we see why they draw the way they do.
Shelley, I would thank you for explaining what you meant in your post when you said, I hope the Republicans do not do this. But I'll ask you what Emil said to you earlier. If this is about how it's being presented publicly, wouldn't we just vote to outlaw gerrymandering? Like that would be more of a fair act. So
the problem is, here's the problem. And I said it earlier, and I'm sorry, that's a bad word. I shouldn't say problem. Here's the issue. You can't separate, like what the gentleman was saying inside of the well of the house, Mr. Carter, right? What he was saying was going back to those days in 1898, 1868 and stuff like that. Excuse me. Clearly, that was racially done, right? We're not letting the Black senator sit seated, da-da-da-da-da. Back then, all of those people were Republican. And so if you reverse it back to now, it's just a reverse of back then. All of us were in one party, but it was racial. We know that. Now, the issue becomes any map that you draw around majority minority is going to be a Democrat map because 90% of us are in the Democrat Party. And so one of my problems with the Supreme Court decision was that, well, beyond the snaky way in which the map was drawn was the fact any map you draw that's going to be majority minority is going to be a Democrat map because we're all Democrats. Or, you know, you all are Democrats. We all are Democrats, right? And so my problem with all of this is you can't almost get around the race part of it because we're all in one party. And so to his point about when he's talking about the history, the issue is, how do you draw a map in Louisiana to what you guys were saying earlier? How do you draw a map in Louisiana when only 33% of the population of the state are African American? How do you draw that map? If you're not all in New Orleans, you know what I mean? Not 400,000 of them. So how do you draw that map? And so in order to get any fair representation in Louisiana for 33% of the population, you're going to have to draw that snake-like map. And that's what they're saying is unfair in 2026 because you're using race as a barometer. And so that's what we're arguing something that, yes, It's quite possible it still exists. It is probably very likely that it still exists. But we're arguing something in 2026, and the phrasing of our argument is we want race-based maps. And the only reason we want race-based maps is because we know 90% of our population are Democrats. Period. It's not
I'm reversing the argument because they want race-based maps too. They just don't have to say that. That's the problem,
they don't have to.
They're going to say that. They're not going to say that.
They don't want race-based. I mean, they want race-based maps the same way you want them, except they want to get rid of them because they're all Democrat. You want them because they're all Democrat. That's the fight here.
If we had a proper distribution, and we could go back to President Eisenhower, where we probably had the best distribution of Black voters. Perhaps you can go back to before FDR and see a better distribution than that. But in the modern era, it's President Eisenhower, and that was about 1/3, 2/3, right? Where you saw that, and there's a reason for that. But why isn't the Voting Rights Act invoked in non-Southern states? Why isn't it in Massachusetts or Minnesota or California? That's because none of those states have the same history that the Southern states do. If that history does not exist, you see more fair congressional districts. And I know the Democrats gerrymander, but they're also the ones most willing to outlaw it for a reason. There is a reason why.
I'm in total agreement.
It's not been outlawed. And that's because Republicans in their current iteration have said they do not want to woo the majority of Black voters from the Democratic Party. If that maintains, the only way you get to where we are today, challenging the Voting Rights Act, is if they see a benefit to their party in its current iteration that does not woo the majority of Black voters to redraw those maps. That is a problem that must be addressed. I don't care about the theory today. I care about the facts. And the facts are that the Republican Party, who's chosen not to woo the majority of Black voters, wants the Voting Rights Act gutted. They got their decision from the Supreme Court, and they're immediately acting on that decision. If they were wanting fair elections, they didn't have to wait for the Voting Rights Act to be gutted. They could have done it before. They chose not to.
Let me play this cut.
The Voting Rights Act of 1965 completely changed the game. When that act was finally passed by Congress, there were only 72 Black elected officials in the entire United States. In the entire United States.
You're not talking about just Senate, House of Representatives.
No.
You're literally talking about state houses.
That's it.
Anywhere.
72.
In the whole country.
There you go. And then, of course, it started to do its work. And so by 1980, right before the Congress reauthorized the Voting Rights Act, we were up to about 1,500. And then Congress amended the Voting Rights Act in 1982 to change the test used for establishing discrimination under Section 2.
Right.
And after that passed...
What was the test that they used? Or what was the test prior to that, and what was the test after that? Sure.
So we had thought that the test was that if you showed that a particular practice used by a state resulted in Black people not being able to elect their candidates of choice, it violated the Voting Rights Act.
Okay.
Then the Supreme Court in 1980, in a decision called Mobile versus Bolden, said, no. The test has to be that you have to show that the jurisdiction was intentionally racist. Like, intended, yes.
So the guy would literally have to come up and go, we're just trying to be racist.
Yeah, and of course...
Even though they didn't do that in Reconstruction.
Listen,
they never did that.
Well, there were a few cases where there's some interesting hearings that took place in state houses where they said some things, but that certainly was not the norm by 1980, right? Which is why the effects test was so important. So the Supreme Court says, no, it has to be intentional discrimination. And Congress comes back and says in 1982, no, we meant you can just show that the effects of the decision produced this result.
The results.
And these are the amendments to the Voting Rights Act in 1982. You know who really was opposed to those amendments in 1982?
I'm going to say Oliver Wendell Holmes.
No,
Who?
a very bright young lawyer who worked in the Department of Justice, first as a special aide to, it's not going well, as a special aide to the Attorney General and then to the Solicitor General. And he was the point person on trying to convince Congress not to pass these amendments that would address the Supreme Court's decision in Mobile versus Bolden. And that young attorney's name was John Roberts.
So this has been something he's been on for some time.
He's a patient man.
Shelley, your thoughts on the system breaking down all of the details?
I'm going to say it again. Let's go with Mr. Carter from Louisiana, and let's go back to 1898 and all the history, where we are now, her conversation, Cleo Field's conversation. What do you do? What do you do as African Americans? What do we do as African Americans? You have these conversations on Jon Stewart's show. You have these conversations on MS Now. You have these conversations to rile up the Democrat vote, which is mostly 90% black. What do you do strategically around this? Where do you go? I'll tell you where we should go. We should go to a place where we start to work strategically and logically and not emotionally and just yelling about the same things, according to Mr. Carter, we've been yelling about since 1898. Because clearly, if you're dealing with a white man, quote unquote, that everyone here is telling me I'm dealing with, that is so insidious and so duplicitous, and John Roberts has been working for this since he was an aide at the Supreme Court and the Attorney General, what do you do? What strategically do you do? Well, you strategically change where you can your voter identification to independent, strategically, or you change it to Republican, strategically. You vote the same way you want to vote, but you change everything. If they're getting ready to draw out James Clyburn's district in South Carolina, every single African American in those districts that it's redrawn to should become Republicans on paper. Because there's no racial classification inside of your voter base. I know it's in Georgia, it's not. But you change your voter identification to Republican. And then what do? You put up white Democrats as Republicans in the new South Carolina district, and you run them as Republicans. You see, this idea that we can sit around and completely, he's racist. Okay, what else is new? I've been hearing that since the 80s, since I was born. Okay, what do you do?
Right. So what you're saying is what I've been advocating for I don't know however long.
I mean, but I'm saying now, but at this point it's 2026.
So here it is. Yeah. So at this point, 2026, I am at least challenging that you also avoid the context of why it's being done.
I already know why it's being done. You just told me since 1998 it's being done. I just admitted that. Yeah, okay, let's take Mr. Carter's history. What's the point in knowing why it's being done if you're not going to do anything strategically to fix it? Yeah, who cares? I'm sorry. Here's why it's done. White Republicans are racist. Newsflash.
There's no way I'm disagreeing with your actions, so I'm going to make sure let's be clear.
I just said.
Yeah, there's no way I'm disagreeing with your actions. Like
it's an intellectual.
I've been told for a decade I'm crazy for thinking.
Right, but what I'm saying is an intellectual circle jerk to sit here and have a conversation for 20 minutes about the 1800s and 2026 and the racism and all of that. It's like, okay, let's go with all of that is true. Yes, okay, 100% true. Now what?
Absolutely. Emil, your thoughts before I play another cut.
I agree with Shelley on this one point, and it's very, very clear.
Okay, you came back in. Okay, cool. Go ahead.
All right. And it's very, very clear that the old way of approaching politics is no longer valid, and it won't be going forward. So we're going to have to worry about what we do next. And Shelley's brought up one strategy. That is not the only strategy, but it is a strategy. And that's the thing that we're going to have to learn as Black voters is that we're going to have to be far more strategic than we've been in the past, because A, we're not a bloc anymore the way we once were, and certainly we do not have the same political power we used to have, and B, there is a potential reward for what he's doing that's beyond just the representation by race, and that is that there's a power that we could assume in all politics if we were to do that. However, I'm still not going to abandon the history to do it, because right now we do not have two parties that are equally wooing the majority of Black voters to their cause, which means until we have that, or until we have a sufficient minority within the Republican Party that can change their platforms and make other voters say, okay, that's a viable choice, or to have a leader the way Shelley wants to have a leader that can come into a specific geographic area and make that strategy work, we're going to work through the history the way it is, and we're going to use the tools that are available to us.
Let me say one thing. Let me say one thing. I had Carolyn Bordeaux.
That's where I was about to go. I was about to go to Carolyn Bordeaux. So,
okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I wanted to highlight, because I hear what you're saying, Emil. I was going to say to Shelley, Carolyn Bordeaux, if I hope I'm saying her name correctly, she highlighted that, hey, we need to be more concerned about the actual power than representation. And so I wanted to have Shelley, in a sense, speak to that. Here's my question to you, Shelley. What does that power look like? Because I don't think that our community has ever even thought about what actually political power actually looks like. So that's my question to you.
So here's the problem. You keep talking about political power. The basis of your question assumes political power means just for Black people. So what she's talking,
okay,
no, I'm saying the basis of your question. You're right. So what she's saying is that in this new non-VRA drawn districts, African Americans are going to have to build coalitions to achieve political power. And what that means is that you're no longer looking at political power as based on color and race. You're looking at political power based on ideas and policies. And so that benefits us. And the reason why it benefits us, you, whatever you want to say, the reason why it benefits us is because heretofore, you've had political power just based on the color of someone's skin. Oh, my congressman looks like me, therefore I have representation. But there's no power in that. There's no ability to move legislation except part of the larger group. The Congressional Black Caucus is a bunch of African-American Congress people in Congress, but collectively they have no power to move legislation. They only have the power to agree to the legislation the party wants them to do. So we're always in this minority position, representation without power. So with this, what she's saying, and I totally agree with this new move by the Supreme Court, it's going to take maybe several election cycles. But what will happen is African Americans and in groups will start to work with other groups to form coalitions to get things done. Now, unless you're assuming every white person is racist, you're going to have to allow that to happen. And now you're going to have to, in order to get, let's say, what's one of the big issues? In order to get, say, Medicaid expansion in the state of Georgia, you're not just a Congressional Black Caucus, which most of the Democrats in the state of Georgia at the state level are all African American, but they're in a minority position. So now you're able to work across racial and party lines because you can build a coalition. And I think she's absolutely right at this. And that's why I'm talking about what the strategy is. Right, because absolutely. When she said that, a lot of people came on my page calling her names. And I was like, okay, she's trying to tell you how to work this thing out. Absolutely. But you're just stuck on, they took away our rights.
So go ahead, Emil. Go. Let me say this before we go, Emil. Let me go here first. Emil. Let me go here first. I want to agree with Shelley and then let you go. So I got invited years ago. I got invited to like a Juneteenth thing to speak at a Juneteenth thing years ago, and so what I exposed him to was when Malcolm started his new organization, for African Unity. I forget, I always get the letters mixed up. But when he started that actual organization, you know, back then they used to do 3-hour speeches. So he had like a 3-hour speech, right, to start his new organization. There was almost an hour spent on understanding political science. So I highlighted that when I got asked to this Juneteenth thing. I highlighted the pieces of Malcolm X's speech talking about that our community would need to actually be taught political science just due to how the numbers were. And that, you know, because he was happy about finally being able to take the importance of politics, because while he was in the OI, he couldn't address politics. So when he was on his own, he wanted to address politics. And so I remember presenting at this has been over a decade ago, where I presented and said, hey, if we were to become political independents, it would take about an 8-year, 2 election cycles, about an 8-year period where both parties would finally realize, oh, they're serious about not being tied to a party, and both parties would have to woo us. They would be forced to in close elections. Obviously, at the time, I said, well, we're obviously very partisans in the states in the areas where they're very partisan, this won't matter. But even though we've moved to the 3rd population group, we're still the 2nd largest voter bloc. So in those places, we will be the deciding factor if we were willing to be this strategic. I said this damn near 20 years ago, Emil. Now, to Shelley's point, this situation is going to force us to become strategic, or we're going to stay uninvolved and not be strategic and just complain and keep getting the results that we don't want. So it absolutely requires, to Shelley's point, I want Shelley to understand this. I'm glad that he explained it, because what does the power look like? It actually involves creating coalitions. It's the only way to do it. And here's my last point, and I'll go to you, Emil. What we've missed, and I'm going to talk about this on my Men's Dialogue show on Saturday. What we've missed is we've misunderstood what our ancestors did to even get these guardrails in place. Meaning, they got us to a place to where we should have been doing what Shelley is saying. They've already gotten us this. We've held on to that history and continue to fight for something that we've already gotten. I'd be shocked if Shelley wouldn't agree with that. We're just now being moved and being forced to have to play the way Carolyn Bondeau is suggesting. And I hope more of us get it, because it is the only way to play. The only way to play when you are the minority is to create coalitions. There's no way to play without it when you are the majority, as we are. If you don't understand that, then the reason you think we don't get anything politically is because you don't understand what we're talking about right now. Go ahead, Emil.
The Congressional Black Caucus is one of the largest, if not the largest, caucus for what it does. I mean, there are some political caucuses that are maybe a little bit bigger, but it could be far more powerful, to Shelley's point. And this is my problem. It's not that he's wrong. I think Shelley is 100% right in the theory. What I'm worried about is the bridge between here and there. This is the problem that a lot of the Black legislators and leaders were facing for the past 60 years. How do you get there and not lose something along the way? That sacrifice is too great to make on an individual election basis. You want to do that? Yes, there's a very, subtle way to do it. The way Shelley mentions, if you can get everybody to flip from Democrat to Republican and then run a Democrat as a Republican. And
don't use the word subtle, Emil. You can't use the word subtle. Like for example, I just watched Stokely Carmichael in the 60s talking about how he thought about political power and how it's being used. It was bold. This requires bold.
I'll teach you that.
I don't disagree with that. I'm just talking about when I say subtle, I'm just saying when you reduce what he's saying to something subtle, it's going to take a bold movement. It can't be subtle. And to suggest that what he's suggesting is subtle kind of weakens what he's talking about. And we need to wake up to what we actually need to do. So don't call it subtle.
Let's use the language as it's intended. It's not subtle, it's bold. But the problem that we're facing is that's also just a precarious position that you might lose what you've gained. I know that's not popular to hear, but that's kind of the way things are in the way people are interpreting all of this time. It feels like an assault on our rights. It feels like people do not understand how to use it. And certainly we do not have the savvy strategic vision that Shelley would like us to have. Not that we cannot have it, not that we should not have it.
Carolyn Bordeaux would like us to have, he's just backing a sister who understands politics, and he's just agreeing with her. Like, I want to make sure
I'm not disagreeing with it either. I'm saying that what is the practical effect of a strategy like this? There is the potential that you have to lose something in order to gain something, and that potential frightens a lot of people. That is a real practical issue that must be addressed. It's not to say that we will, but the concern is there because we see the assault on our rights all the time. And I'm not saying that assault is effective, but it certainly has gotten to a point where people do not want to test the waters in any other strategy. And that is a problem we must address if we're going to go forward boldly.
Shelley, I can absolutely respect based on what I'm seeing this current administration do. I can actually respect like the strategy being something that people would fear based on what all will be lost while we're doing this transition. Go ahead.
That's a fair statement, but the question has to be asked right now. What did you lose? You if you look at it realistically, you lost. I mean, potentially with this ruling by the Supreme Court, you've only lost a black face in Congress. That's it. You've not lost anything because you weren't getting anything. By definition, we can run down the list. You weren't getting anything.
That's not true. When you run down the list.
I
won't agree to that. I will not agree to that.
Hold on. We definitely got things.
Well, hold on. From those representatives is what I'm talking about. You would have gotten exactly what you got as African-American Democrat voters from a white Democrat in the same seat. No difference. Right. That's all I'm saying. So what have you really lost? Nothing. All we got was representation since 1965. That was the intended purpose. It says it in the law that minority voters would be represented in Congress. It came with no power, no guarantees, no nothing, just a face. And many of those people, when they got elected, because they were in safe seats, they never had to do anything for the constituents because they were never going to be voted out. And it's the same. And I'm saying the same thing. I don't want to see Republican seats like this. I don't want to see safe seats. And I've said this on my show, anywhere in the country, because if you have a safe seat, Republican or Democrat, the people, the voters will never get anything done for them because you're in a safe seat. You don't have to do anything except come around every 2 years and say, hey, vote for me. Okay, yay. And 90% of incumbents win re-election. So I don't want to see it on either side. But I don't want to, what Carolyn Bordeaux, which is what I'm saying, she's saying, we both agree, we both said it on my show, is that in 2026, you've got to now look at coalition building. You've got to look at being part of a larger group, which should have been the case from the 60s because we're only 13% of the population.
Right.
I submit to you, Shelley, that we were the coalition leaders and people followed in our wake. And then we abdicated a lot of that leadership because as the coalition grew, it got to be more overwhelming. And we started thinking that our leadership and a lot of people see, there's a lot of things that I won't address in detail here, Shelley. I'll just say this. There's a lot of people who are on one side of this equation who don't like black people. And just because they agree with us on an issue or a few issues does not mean that they agree with us in the coalition we should have been building over time. And that problem has persisted just as long as the problem you're seeing. In other words, just because we had a coalition, which we did, there were a lot of people who joined our coalition in the 60s and 70s that abandoned us as soon as they got the gains they wanted out of that coalition. We didn't adapt our politics to those changing coalition requirements, and therefore we got abandoned by a lot of people and were left alone. I can talk about that in another way, in another time. But I'm here to tell you that I agree with all of what you guys are saying. I'm just worried about the effect of getting there between now and then. I do not agree that the Congressional Black Caucus has done nothing since the 60s or the 70s. I do agree.
I don't think I heard Shelley say that. I don't think I heard Shelley say that. So I don't think we should.
No, he said, what are you getting that you didn't get from you couldn't have gotten from a white Democrat? And what I'm saying is they have done things for us, but they haven't done as much as they could have done.
It doesn't equate to nothing, though. I'm just saying, I don't think he's saying that at all. That's we got to do a pivot here before I catch out for the very end. I wanted to move into this sooner, but again, I thought this was good dialogue. Killer Mike has come under attack. And so this sister wrote this piece. What's the sister's name that wrote the piece?
Goldie Taylor. Goldie Taylor.
All right, cool.
Goldie Taylor.
Goldie Taylor. So I'm just going to read a little bit.
And may I interject here?
Go ahead.
She fine as hell. Sorry.
Shelley being Shelley, y'all, if you don't know. All right. She wrote a piece that says, Killer Mike, shut the F up. And so I'm going to just read a little bit of it because I'm going to let Shelley respond and let Emil respond. She says, Dear Killer Mike, there was a time when I listened. When you spoke about organizing, about ownership, about building something durable for Black people in a country that has never made it easy for us to breathe, let alone thrive. I listened. Many of us did. You had credibility. You had lived it. You sounded like a man who understood the stakes. But somewhere along the way, the message got twisted, or maybe the moment did. Either way, what you chose to do with your platform had consequences, real ones, measurable ones, and no amount of posturing or rhetorical backflips can wash it away. Let's be plain about it. You spent years building credibility as the conscience of Black political imagination, the one who would tell us the truth, even when the truth was inconvenient. So let's tell one now. When the country was choosing between a flawed coalition and an authoritarian, you went on national television and declined to endorse. You lent credibility where none was deserved. You amplified narratives that depressed turnouts, that seeded distrust, that told people their vote didn't matter, or that both outcomes were equally disposable. They weren't. They never are. Here's the part that's hard to hear. Influence without accountability is just ego dressed up as activism. And for too long, too many people with microphones have been allowed to operate without ever reckoning with what happens after the applause. You don't get to light a match and then step back from that fire. Go ahead, Shelley, your response to the sister.
Well, I responded on my show. It's on my Facebook. Anybody can see it. It's on my Facebook page, SHELLEYWYNTER. It said in defense, it's called In Defense of Killer Mike. Did a whole segment on it, went through her article. I know Goldie Taylor. She's a beautiful, brilliant woman. But on this, I disagree for several reasons. One, you're making Killer Mike, the Ta-Nehisi Coates, the Mark Lamont Hills. These Democrats are making them scapegoats. The basic issue is African Americans per Gallup and per Pew Research are moving away from the Democrat Party. And the reason why they're moving away, they're not going to the Republican Party, don't get me wrong, but they're moving away from the Democrat Party. And the reason why they're moving away is to our conversation that we were just having right here. They don't feel like anything changes. You've had Democrat majority Congress, Democrat majority Senate. You've had Democrat presidents. You've had all three at the same time, several times over the last several election cycles. And African Americans, by and large, will look back and say, nothing's changed for me. Nothing's changed for me. Now, you can argue the different things that do change, but if someone doesn't feel it or see it, it never happened. And so that being the case, what Killer Mike did when he was on, I think it was Bill Maher, when they asked him about Kamala, he was like, or I think it was not Kamala, about Hillary, either one, he was like, no comment. Well, no, I'm not going to go out there and endorse her simply because. I'm not. And he has that right. But to think that the vast majority of black people are sitting around waiting to hear what Killer Mike or Ice Cube or any other pundit has to say about anything, and they're responsible. I just don't think. I think it's patronizing at best. I will say what Killer Mike did do, what she was referring to, what he did do was reflect the feelings and opinions of thousands and thousands of African Americans nationally, in barbershops, in beauty salons, on the street corners. That is what people were saying at the time. You know, this idea I see on Facebook, oh, you brothers that didn't want Kamala, look at you now. Well, there's a bunch of brothers who didn't want Kamala, who didn't want Kamala for whatever reasons they had. You know what I mean? It could have been California prosecutor. It could have been any number of reasons. They didn't want a woman. It doesn't matter. There were a number of people who did not support her in the black community. There are a number of people who didn't support Hillary in the black community. There are a number of people in the Republican Party that didn't support Trump for various reasons. This idea that Killer Mike is to be blamed because what we have now is absurd to me, especially a man that spent so much of his time trying to help African Americans and talking and advocating for black people. I think it's an absurd accusation, and it's no different than them going after anybody else in our community all of a sudden. But
for example, when they went after Jim Brown just from talking to the president, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
He has a huge history of supporting us.
Right.
Emil, I don't know if you got a chance to read more of the article or you can respond to just the part. Okay, go ahead. Your thoughts on what you saw in there.
So this is sort of a conundrum that we face in our community that I'll just say out loud, and that is that we have outsized voices that can influence people, and I would love to be where Shelley is and say that, you know, they don't have that voice, but we're not talking about a voice with no say over the people whatsoever. These voices actually do have some significant influence. And if they know they have significant influence, I'm not going to tell them what to say. They have the right to say whatever they want to, but they have to be mindful of the influence they do wield. That is their responsibility. However they wield it, they need to be mindful of it. And the problem is apathy is a vote against us every single time. So at the very least, they should say, I don't care who you vote for, but don't not vote. Don't sit at home, because sitting at home helps the wrong side. Every single time, not voting helps the guy you don't want to win. So even if that's true, that every one of these people, Ice Cube and those guys, I mean, they went and tried to, like Ice Cube went and tried to get the platinum plan, or tried to influence the platinum plan. He went with the contract with Black America. But once he went to the Republicans and they integrated it into the platinum plan, which never materialized, by the way, even in the second term so far, you don't see a long-standing advocacy for the contract with Black America from Ice Cube beyond that, right? He didn't continue down that path politically, saying who's going to come and get this after the election. Where is the result that we talked about? You said it was in the platinum plan. Where's Ice Cube saying to this administration right now, how come you are not implementing the points of the platinum plan that you said you wanted to implement? Where's that advocacy? Where's that from Killer Mike?
You want me to tell you?
If you don't have it, then it's as if they took that influence and put it in the garbage disposal.
Right. So let me say,
let me say, can I say something? Is that worse than the Democrats not even talking to him?
Right. Let me say something. Because I got to go. My battery's running low, right? So let me just say this. If I'm Ice Cube and I put forth a plan before an election to both sides, one side doesn't even meet with me. The other side meets with me, takes portions of my idea, folds it into something they want to do, and rolls it out. But during this time, people who love my music, love me, supported me during my career, say all these nice things to me, all of a sudden, in hundreds and hundreds of thousands, go on social media calling me a coon, a sellout, all of these names, you know what I'm going to do? Especially if I got FU money, I'm sitting at home and saying, F everybody. I don't care. I'm taking care of my family. And let me be really honest to the Goldie Taylors and everybody else about Killer Mike.
Politics.
Hold on. No.
Get into politics if you can't stand that.
Listen, they know that now. This is my point to your question. They know that now. My point is, here you have a Killer Mike who advocates, who sat with Brian Kemp. When Brian Kemp was, not Brian Kemp, the legislature in Georgia, they're writing an anti-gang law. And there are portions of this law that literally would have had police department, sheriff's office just rounding up black kids for just standing on a corner, right? So he went to the governor, right? I was and I know this to be true because I helped put the meeting together myself with others. He went to the governor and he said, hey, there's portions of this law that will allow police officers just to round up kids. They could be walking to school in a group of 5, right? So the governor understood that. Republican state legislators understood that. So they kind of not watered down, but kind of stripped the language out, right? First thing. Second thing he met with Governor Kemp on was pushing trade schools. Right. After that meeting in the state legislature, trade schools started to get more money, right? So here's a guy who's willing to meet and talk. He got so much criticism from these same black people that love Killer Mike. Oh, why are you sitting with him? Why you meet with him? Why you do this? And so if I'm him, my family's secure, my career is secure, my wife loves me, I love my wife. I'm like, you know what? F this. I don't need to advocate for anybody but my own family. And that's where you get to where you are now. Because
I'm glad Martin Luther King did not, because 68% of the polled black people in 1964 did not like Dr. King. And yet he persisted. If you're going to enter the fray, enter the fray. I'm not telling you it's going to be easy. I'm not going to tell you it's going to be easy. But Dr. King endured bombings, and he endured black people saying, I don't like him rabble rousing. It makes my life harder. And yet he persisted. I'm sorry. I'm just not.
I respect what you're saying, Emil. I respect what you're saying. However, the conversation we've had today that's the challenge, that if we're going to step up and be strategic, it's going to require understanding the history of being like a Martin per se, but also understanding why Ice Cube might buy out based on his proclivity.
Let me say that my battery's going dead. I got 5%. Let me just say this. Emil, you just said, going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, why any kind of coalition may not work, not because of the other people, members of the coalition, but because of our own people. Because quite honestly, we don't know what we want. To your point, 68% of African Americans thought Martin Luther King was a rabble rouser. Now 70% of African Americans who were adults during that time said they were at the March on Washington. I'll talk to y'all later. I love y'all.
Good stuff. Hey, these are hard conversations. That's what we do with Politically Conscious. I'm not saying we got it all right, but we brought it to you from the left and from the right. I didn't get to as many many of y'all comments today. I put up a few. Again, just rushing through this thing. I think I got one more cut I want to just end with if I got a second from you. I'm not going to do this because Shelly's not here. He had made a point about thinking that he says there's only 6 HBCUs that we need, but with the conversation, we didn't get it. So hopefully next time we get him on, we'll talk about his thoughts about HBCUs. I don't know if he realizes the growth that's happened with the HBCUs under this current administration, about 4.7% increase in enrollment due to what's happening with DEI and things of that nature. And the DEI stuff happened with I was, be clear when I say this on this show, started with the Supreme Court decision made under Biden per se, but obviously this administration has further rid us of DEI, and they actually go after schools for trying to maintain any remnants of DEI. So we are seeing.
Absolutely. I mean, I offer that, yes, it happened during Biden's watch, but the Biden administration advocated for the DEI policies. And
absolutely. I'm just highlighting that what we're seeing in colleges didn't happen at the time frame is what I'm trying to be clear about. I'm not suggesting that Biden advocated. They were against what the Supreme Court did, but that all goes back to who Trump put on the Supreme Court in his first term. So that's why they have the court to be able to make these decisions. But I just always have to clarify that, what we're seeing in colleges, happen at that case. I'm just trying to make sure. And then thank you for saying what you're saying, so that makes sure that people are not receiving it as I'm saying that Biden was for it or something. So I'm not saying that. So thank you for that.
You and I have talked about this, Montoya, and I think it's probably going to be much more paramount to the Democratic Party today than it has been in the past. Are you really going to tell the world what you're doing on our behalf? Or are you going to keep hiding it? Because the fact is that a chunk of Black men and a very smaller chunk of Black women are now looking at the Democratic Party with a different lens. And that is, why are you still not pushing the things that we know you can do to the forefront? If it helps,
and they have done. That's the saddest part about what we are.
I wish they would just say
they have been done. And people are probably thinking when I'm this excited about it that I'm not an independent. I'm just, as an independent, I just go look for what has been done. And so when I see what's been done, Shelley made a great point. It doesn't matter what's been done if the person doesn't feel like nothing.
If they don't feel it, and you have to run on it.
That people will vote off of a perspective versus the reality. I give credit wherever I've lived locally, with whatever party has done something that benefits me, I've owned it, right? And I say me based on whatever my socioeconomic class is or whatever. But something that I never forget, and some of us never do, is at the end of the day, we don't even realize collectively how much money we don't have as a collective. We think we have more money than we have because of how propaganda is being used. And the reality is, since I understand that only 2 million of us are above the 50th percentile in income earning, when you don't understand it, and I understand that the rest of that, the other 43 million are under that, then I do have. Even if I'm doing okay, I still rather have a policy that makes sure my grandma gets her Medicare. You know what I'm saying? So I advocate for that, even if I'm straight. And I'm not saying every person has to be that, but I'm just saying, as an independent, I'm going to call it for what it is. And there's a lot of policies that we would say we didn't get anything. And I'm going to talk about this on Saturday. We don't do politics on Saturday, but I'm going to bring up some things just so that people are more aware of the things that you do get from politics, because people actually think politics is not effective. And I get how and why, but it don't mean they're right.
I agree. And the problem that I have with a lot of the things that we're talking about in the public eye is that we're looking for a very selfish gain. And there was a time in our voting history where we looked out for each other through the vote. We didn't say, I made money last year, let me vote this way. It is, my community is suffering, let me make sure that the person representing us is addressing our issues. That collective view is beginning to has eroded significantly over the last 60 years or so. And that is a significant detriment, because you do have people who can say, under this administration, I make more money. Under this administration, I make less money. But I'm not looking at my personal I wasn't raised politically to look at my personal fortune as a way to vote. I've always been taught the community's interest is my interest, not the other way around. And because of that, I vote and I advocate for people to look what benefits the community most, vote that way, because almost invariably when the community benefits, like my grandparents were entrepreneurs, that's a reality. When the community benefited, our business benefited. So it was always to our benefit to have a community focus, because at the end of the day, it came back to us. That's not true for every Black voter anymore. And that probably is one of the reasons why we don't know what we want, because we did know what we wanted when we looked at it collectively from that, let's make sure everybody's uplifted first. And then I definitely can be uplifted within that.
Yeah. And then the thing that this is something that Americans just generally fail to understand about politics is we're unrealistic about what politics should get us to. You know what I mean? Like there's this, we actually want to see something like more significant to actually say we got something, and not understanding that politics is the baseline to safety, just the basics. That's what our tax dollars should ensure that we're getting. And sometimes based on how you're voting, you're not getting that. But if you're looking for something bigger, you're missing when you don't get something, because you were looking for a bigger prize. You know what I mean? And now you don't have, a simple guardrail. But again, I'm gonna talk about some of this on Saturday, not to make Saturday's mental dialogue perspective for anybody out there watching. Tune in on Saturday morning. I'm gonna have Latrice on. Emil, if you have time, I might actually ask you still some time on that show as well. We're gonna go a lot of places, but I do want to highlight some of the things that we misunderstand and how we end up attacking each other because we misunderstand some of these things, right? And
I like it.
Yeah, so that's going to be a good show on Saturday. Thank y'all. Please share this show. I actually forgot to set it up for the cell phones. That's where we get most of our listeners. You shouldn't have to I'm just saying this at the tail end, just so you know, Emil. I don't know what the numbers will be on this show because I only set it up one way. They used to do it automatically. Now I forgot that I have to do it myself. I did it last week. I forgot to do it today. So I don't know. So I'm saying to everybody out there, share this show because our numbers are going to be low for this show since I didn't do the cell phone version that I normally do on this. So I'm just asking and pleading, if y'all like this show, please share with others because I didn't get to promote it. And we usually been doing okay, even if I didn't promote, as long as I put the cell phone version. So giving y'all some details that I probably shouldn't give y'all, but we need y'all support. So go subscribe to our page so that you automatically get the actual updates. And it don't matter if I do cell phone or this version. All right. Thank you, Emil. One last closing statement. We always let you close the show. So go ahead, brother.
This is a chance for Black voters and all voters who are watching our show to start to pay attention to what they can get from their politician. This is no longer about he looks like me, she looks like me, therefore. It has to be policy. We've talked about this before, Montoya. A savvy voter understands what policy means and that the representative they elect are going to enact policies that make their lives and the lives of their community, whoever their community is, better. And when a politician doesn't do that, they're going to try to mask it using propaganda. And you know what we do, Montoya.
If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Thank y'all for all the comments. Thank you for sharing the show, Iris. All right, we'll be back on Saturday with the Mental Dialogue Perspective. And next week, once a week, we pop up different days of the week. Well, the Politically Conscious Show. See y'all next week. Thank you, Emil.